Afternoon, folks. It's June the 11th, and as you're all undoubtedly aware, we're seeing chaos and disorder in the streets and an unprecedented attack on the rule of law. I wanted to share something with you regarding that. I wrote it this morning. I found this on a good friend's website. It's the difference between National Socialism and International Socialism. This is what I wrote regarding it. The truth regarding identity politics and social collectivism. I don't care if it's the Übermensch versus the inferior races, the proletariat versus the bourgeoisie, or the intersectionally oppressed versus the patriarchy. They all will invariably create anarchy to undermine the rule of law, which then leads to murder, repression under total state control, along with an attack on the most persecuted minority of all, the sovereign individual who is endowed with inherent rights, created in God's image, and answerable to Him for their actions. So, every single liberal principle upon which Western society is founded, the idea of the sovereign person, is under attack now. And oddly, from some of the people, from groups of people who claim to be the biggest individualists among them, namely artists and musicians, proving that, of course, they're not really individualistic at all. They're completely and utterly willing to march in lockstep. That's the first observation I had to make of where we're at, because nothing can ensure equality other than the rule of law. Lady Justice must remain blind and weigh every person with her scale, regardless of their identity, either personal or group identity. And another thing I'd like to share today is my growing admiration for Epoch Times, American thought leaders, Crossroads, with Joshua Phillip. I shared something. They've been doing an excellent job, first of all, on reporting on the horrific oppression in China and repression, the persecuted groups that the regime, the CCP, won't tolerate, namely religious freedom and anyone who requires it. They've been taking practitioners of Falun Gong and harvesting their organs while they're still alive. They persecute the house churches, of course. When I was a young man, I became very fascinated by Stephen Kong's translation of Watchman Nee's sermons. And I followed the story of the Chinese church with humility, because their level of dedication to Christ was something that I hadn't seen in the church here in North America. And in sharing something from Epoch Times, which is funded by the Falun Gong, or originally founded by them, some Chinese chap who claimed to be a pastor rebuked me for sharing something from a cult. And I asked him a simple question. Why is our practitioners of Falun Gong, and the people that founded Epoch Times, doing a better job of talking about the persecution of the house churches in China than you? I said, I asked him, do you denounce the CCP's repression of the church in China. And then he told me he wouldn't get involved in politics. And right then and there, I knew that I was talking to a member of the 50-cent army. He was no more a pastor than I'm a one-legged hermaphrodite trans-testicle from Mithilaknawakistan. Along with this attack on the rule of law, behind it are agitators placed here by the CCP and other countries with radical left leanings to constantly erode our culture. Words no longer have their original meaning. When I say in Norwegian, "det var veldig gøy," meaning that was very gay, very happy, it has a totally different meaning than it has in English now. You can't say gay anymore. You can't use a whole list of other words. You see that even the CBC cut the heads off of one of their talking heads, one of the biggest apologists for left-leaning PBS watching, pottery-making, pro-abortion, gay rights activism this nation has ever seen, because she used a word which neither the CBC or this news broadcaster will mention, but she's forever remorseful. You know, in every single collectivist totalitarian regime, they had public repentance sessions where people who actually were guilty of nothing were forced to apologize for something that was either not inappropriate or something, or they became guilty purely by association. And this is the other thing we're seeing today. If you're white, you have to be racist. And you're structurally, a part of this oppressive patriarchy that is liberal Western society, the freest, most tolerant, most democratic place on the planet, most prosperous because of free market economy. Every fundamental principle in which our whole society, Western society, is nestled, and they seek to tear it down. That's why these people are suggesting that police be defunded. It's absolutely, I never expected to see this in North America. And we have politicians in Parliament that are, oh yes, Canadians are inherently racist. I posted this the other day. I lived at the end of the Underground Railroad. Harriet Tubman lived in my town. Folks were brought north of freedom out of the oppression that existed in a culture that still condoned slavery. The first act anywhere to prevent slavery from becoming institutionalized here was passed in Niagara-on-the-Lake, 15 minutes from where I grew up, by John Graves Simcoe, our first lieutenant governor, who declared before he established our first parliament that he would have North American natives, Africans, and Europeans treated identically under English common law. There can be no equality without the rule of law. The government cannot mandate what people must think. In fact, it is the people that should mandate what the government is and isn't permitted to do. Because the government's first and foremost job is not social engineering. It is maintaining the rule of law. And this government has completely failed. And yes, Herb Clausen, I'm talking to you. Cheers, mate. We'll have a beer and talk about this.